So if you'll turn there, Matthew chapter 12. We're going to look at verse 15 tonight. And we're going to read down through verse 21. Matthew chapter 12, verse 15 down through verse 21. He is giving us this phenomenal picture of Jesus. Matthew's writing and painting this picture for us. You will note out of the 8 verses, is it? 8 verses, 7 verses. Out of the 7 verses, 3 of them are, 4 of them are prophecy, 3 are not prophecy. So there's more prophetic statement given to us in this passage than there is not. Verse 17 sets up the passage of prophecy, talking about Isaiah who gave this prophecy. So actually 5 of the verses are dedicated to the idea of prophecy. It's the longest prophecy we have quoted in the book of Matthew. And it's just a description of Jesus. Verse 15. But when Jesus knew it, he withdrew from there, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all. Yet he warned them not to make him known, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, Behold, my servant, whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will declare justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel nor cry out, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, a smoking flax he will not quench, till he sends forth justice to victory. And in his name Gentiles will trust. Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Please reveal yourself. Please reveal yourself to me. Please make your face known. Please make your presence felt. Please may your very personhood grip us, embrace us. May we walk out of this place knowing the fullness of the person of Christ. Every barricade, everything that blockades it, everything that would be in the way, in the name of Jesus, I give you permission as if you need it, and yet you said you wanted it. And I give you permission, oh Jesus, to break down every wall in my life and penetrate my life to the depth, uproot everything that's not like you, and bring me into your likeness, I pray thee. Form me into your shape. Remake me. Oh, please, 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 please. Let my world see Jesus through me. In your name I pray. Amen. I've been struggling with the idea of trying to be like God, and I can't quite wrap my mind around that. I'm not quite able to comprehend that or to even in any way, shape, or form get a hold of that. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure I want to be like God. God is too big, He's too sovereign, He's too far out, He's too beyond me to even comprehend in my mind the idea of being any ways near like Him. Jesus is a stretch for me. Being like Jesus is a stretch, but everything in my heart responds to that. Because Jesus, I know He's God, I understand that. But you see, Jesus is the one who's leaped off His throne and become man. Jesus is the second member of the Trinity, the Godhead, that has leaped off His throne and become man. Jesus is the one who's wrapped His arms around my circumstances. Jesus is the one who's walked in my shoes. Jesus is the one who's felt what I've felt. Jesus is the one who's been where I've been. Jesus is the one who's walked through every temptation I've experienced. Jesus is the one who knows what it is to be hated. Jesus is the one who knows what it is to suffer physical pain. Jesus knows what it is to be rejected. Jesus knows what it is to live in suspicion. Jesus knows what it is to embrace my sin. Jesus knows what it is to walk in victory in the midst of my sin. like to be like that. Everything I understand in terms of what's going on in him, I'd like to have that. Everything that made him adequate, if that's available to me, I want it. If every blockade in his life that kept him from the Father was removed and there was no barrier and nothing but total, absolute flow of life and relationship and intimacy and oneness until the Father could totally source and express himself through the man called Jesus. Man, if that, I'd like to be like that. That's the heart's cry. That's my heart's cry. See, I want that. So when we say Christ-likeness, we're not talking about dressing like him. We're not talking about going back to his culture. We're not talking about throwing away our technology. We're not talking about reversing ourselves. We're talking about all that I am, embracing all that he is, so that somehow in that embrace and totality of that embrace, there could be such a flow of the life of God in me that, I could be like him. Is that your driving passion? Are you just trying to get by, or do you have this insight? Have you been captured enough by Jesus to say, everything that he is draws me. Everything that he has done just draws me. Everything that portrays from his being just absolutely captures my heart and pulls me. Whew. I want to be like him. You know that who Jesus is literally irritated a group of people. Just bugged them day after day and just irritated them to the point that their whole life became consumed with that irritation. Isn't that interesting? The crowds had no problem with Jesus. The miracles being done, they loved him. Hey, the free food, they bought into that. His love and the care he had, and he spilled his life out for them. They all bought into that. They had no problem with that. The crowds had no problem with Jesus. There was only this one group that seemed to be irritated. It was like everything he did just rubbed them the wrong way. They were just, and it grew. It started before Jesus even began to minister. It started clear back with John the Baptist. They didn't like John the Baptist either. They couldn't tolerate him. They couldn't do anything about it because of the pressure of the people. And so the devil moved in and he got Herod Antipas to do their job for them, and they were tickled to death. And they wiped their hands and said, John is gone. And by that time, Jesus, of course, was ministering with John. And so the two of them together were putting a lot of pressure on this group down in Jerusalem and down in Jerusalem and Judea area. And there was a lot of pressure on him. And finally, John is gone now. And Jesus realized, I better get out of here. And so he did. He didn't run in fear. But the pressure was building too great. He went to Galilee and started a whole new ministry in Galilee. It was 80 to 100 miles away from this group, the strength of this group. So things were pretty good for a while. Crowds began to grow. Crowds began to build. In fact, there is no way to tell you how massive the crowds were. In fact, foreign lands began to bring their people over. In fact, the people from Jerusalem that he'd tried to get away from, they began to come up. And they began to get in on it too. And finally, in the whole climax of things, Jesus said, this is clear out of hand. I can't handle this. I can't do all this. This is too much for any one man. So he got his disciples and he filled them with something of what was going on inside of him. And he divided them up in pairs and he sent them out and duplicated his ministry. And suddenly the ministry was just expanding by hordes, and here's this and then this group I'm talking about was so irritated about that, they began to stalk him. That brings us to our passage. You see, in chapter 12, they've been stalking him. I'm talking about following him around. I'm talking about taking pictures. I'm talking about, watching carefully. I'm talking about trying to catch him up. I'm talking about laying traps for him. I'm talking about Sabbath day stuff in chapter 12, verse 1 through 8. I'm talking about down at the at the grain field, they were there watching the whole thing. I'm talking about in the synagogue when he went down there. They're involved in that whole thing, seeing that whole thing, setting up a trap. In fact, in the other Gospels, it says they presented this trap to him. They knew good and well exactly what he'd do with the withered hand. The man with the withered hand, they knew what he'd do. They set the trap for him. They were, see, it wasn't that they were trying to figure out what to do with him. They knew exactly what they were going to do with him. They were going to wipe him out. The issue was, how are we going to do it? And they wanted legally to set up the trap. In fact, Matthew summarizes the whole thing up in verse 14. He says, then the Pharisees went out and plotted against him how they might destroy him. We're suggesting to you two ideas in that passage. One is the council idea. It's a summary of everything that they've been doing all the way through this whole ministry plot. The second one is the crushing thing. It's the destroying idea. They wanted to destroy him. Back to the council idea. It's the Greek word bolon. And as you look at that, it's the council idea. It's the focus in. It's the put your head together. It's the come into yourself idea. And we spent time talking about that. See, they were always getting together and putting their heads together and counseling each other. But see, if you always turn in, you'll always come up with the same decision. Why? Because there is no input except you. See, you've developed patterns in yourself. You've developed inward patterns in your own being. You've developed ways of thinking over these years. You're set. And if you always turn in, your patterns are always going to tell you the same thing. How are you ever going to change? Well, you're going to have to go out. You're going to have to go beyond yourself. Well, that's not comfortable. I know. Why? Because it'll bring change. Oh, you don't want to change. Well, then, hey, stay like you are. But wow, if you have any desire at all to be different, if you have any desire to stretch, to be the person God has called you to be, if you have any desire at all to, if I could be like him, if all that's going on in him could go on in me, if that's any possibility at all, how are you going to get that? Well, you aren't going to get it coming like this. You're going to have to go like this. You're going to have to seek him. You're going to have to, I'm open. You're going to have to go beyond yourself. They never did that. And then there's this destroy idea. Apolemy is the Greek word. It's two words put together. It's the idea of apo, which intensifies. That's the prefix which intensifies this whole word for destroy. So it was absolutely destroy. I better not get off on this. See, I've discovered you can't tolerate Jesus if you don't stay open. And if you can't tolerate him, it isn't that you can just shove him to the side. You have to destroy him. See, you've only got two choices. One is embrace him with your whole heart or wipe him out. That's the bottom line of it. That's interesting, isn't it? Because he is so irritating. You know who he is and all that he is, and as it affects you and as it draws you in and as you see who you are, because every time you see him, you see who you are, and he's the most irritating person. He just rubs you like sandpaper. It's just, this group didn't have any choice. Oh, they had a choice, but I mean, they either had to wipe him out or respond to him. They weren't going to respond to him, so they had to destroy him. And again, it wasn't a matter of what we're going to do with him. They'd already decided that. It was a matter of how they were going to do it. They'd already made up their mind. Now, when you come to verse 15, it's interesting because verse 15 in the English translation starts with the word but. It's the conjunction. It's the contrasting conjunction. It's the Greek word day, and it's the primary translation of that word. It's a contrast. See, he's contrasting this picture of the Pharisees, their irritation. Let's get rid of him. Let's kill him. Let's destroy him. They came into themselves. It's that whole picture. Over against that is contrasted this phenomenal picture of Jesus. What is Jesus like? Oh, I can hardly wait to get into all of these verses. Look at verse 18. My servant. That's who Jesus is. Look at the rest of verse 18. Whom I have chosen. That's who Jesus is. Wouldn't you like to be like Jesus? Here's a group over here, irritated, all upset, all plotting. Oh, how we gonna? They can't sleep at night. They're wringing their hands. He's running our whole show. Over here is Jesus, servant, chosen of God. Wouldn't that be great? Oh, look at the rest of verse 18. My beloved. Wouldn't that be great? Over here is hate, destroy, ruin, protect, guard. Over here is love, beloved, embraced. Man. In whom my soul is well pleased. Oh, pleasing to God. It's going to be some great sermons in this, folks. I will put my spirit upon him. Oh, wouldn't that be great? See, he doesn't say that about this group over here. Wouldn't that be great? See, what a phenomenal picture of Jesus. I want to be like Jesus. I want to be like Jesus. But back up. We want to talk about verse 15, the contrast. He starts it like this. When Jesus knew it, let's not go any further than that. Jesus is the subject of the sentence. No question about that. Actually, in our translation, he is the subject and withdrew is the verb. When Jesus knew it, he withdrew from there. So Jesus, he withdrew. He withdrew. That's the subject and the verb, withdrew. Knew is a verb, no question about that, but it's a participle. I want to see if I can explain this to you. This is important. See if you can get this. Here's the way it's laid out in the Greek language. The very first word in the Greek language is ho, H-O. It's a article, the. So the sentence starts with the. The second word is de, which is translated but. The third word is Jesus. So here's the way it's laid out. The, but, Jesus. Now obviously the relates to Jesus. So you shift but around and make it the conjunction at the beginning. But the Jesus. See, there's two principles that you got to get a hold of. One is that they front-loaded their sentences. They always put what was most important, what they wanted to say, what they were stressing, what they really wanted you to get. They put that at the beginning of the sentence. So obviously, the whole sentence is all about Jesus. The big deal here is about Jesus. That's doubly emphasized by the fact that it's not just Jesus, it's the Jesus. We do that. See, it's not a boy, it's the boy, which makes it specific and focused. That's exactly what he's doing. So in front-loading the sentence, the whole big deal is about Jesus, and then putting the article on front of it, oh, it's the Jesus, which double emphasizes the overwhelming fact that the whole picture he's trying to paint is about Jesus. Jesus, he's giving you a picture. Oh, you got to get the picture of Jesus. Now, he starts out in his picture, painting this picture of Jesus, he starts out with the idea of comprehend. Did you see it? When Jesus knew it, comprehended it, got it, knew it. Now, that's a participle. So it's not the main verb. The main verb is withdrew, but this is a participle which acts like an adjective because it modifies Jesus. So you could literally translate it when the knowing Jesus or the knowing Jesus withdrew from there. The knowing, he's the knowing Jesus. He knew. The Greek word for know is gnosko. Oh my, we talk about it all the time. See, it's a word that has the idea of notice, perceive, see, perceive, recognize through experience. Well, that's what's been going on. Jesus has been experiencing this group, this Pharisee group. He's been walking with them. They've been stalking him. He's been confronted with them. They've been talking to him. They've been accusing him. See, he's been interacting with them. Come on, this hadn't been done in secret. He's been interacting with this group. So by experience, he's been rubbing shoulders with, experiencing the attitude, what's coming out of them, what kind of people they are, how they respond, how they respond to him, how they respond to his miracles. He's been experiencing all of that. So as he saw all of that response and interaction with them and experienced them, he began to process it in his mind. And as he intellectually processed it through his mind, coupled with the discernment of the Holy Spirit, he knew. He didn't know because he was divine, although he is God, but that's not how he knew. He didn't know because he's omniscient. He'd set that aside. He knew because he had walked with them, experienced with them, and was soaked in the Spirit of God, and in the discernment of the Spirit knew exactly what they were thinking, what was going on inside of them, felt what they were feeling, knew what they were going to do, how it was going to play out. Remember, he'd just been baptized. Father, through the Spirit, came and filled the man called Jesus. And immediately the Spirit drove him into the wilderness. It was a 40-day, 40-night temptation experience. I'm talking the raw presence of evil was there. I'm talking the devil himself. The full, all out, down to it, get you, ruin you, destroy you, evil. Jesus experienced that for 40 days. Can you imagine what that was like? Here's holiness in all of its greatness. Here's purity. Here's justice. Here's all that Jesus is in the fullness of the Spirit and the righteousness of Christ, up against and experiencing it and in the presence of the raw evil of satanic force. He knew what the devil felt like. He knew what the devil acted like. He knew how the devil smelled. You talk to people who do demonic warfare, spiritual warfare. They'll tell you there's a smell about it. A smell. He experienced all of that. Now he's been with the Pharisees. Oh, by the way, you know what he said about them? You are of your father, the devil. Do you suppose he smelled that same thing out of them? Jesus knew. He knew exactly who they were, exactly what they were going to do, exactly what this was all about. Let me ask you something. How would you handle that? Here's a whole group that you just irritate. Here's a whole group that just, they're out to get you. Here's a whole group. How would you handle that? What would be your first step? How would you react? I mean, wouldn't you get your disciples together and come up with a plan? Wouldn't you strategize? Wouldn't you come in and say, hey, how are we gonna, and what are we gonna, and how are we gonna, and wouldn't you build a larger crowd and say, let's get the crowd so big that we'll just override them? Wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't that be a good plan? Wouldn't you place some key statements in some key places just to contradict what they were their influence? I mean, would it be wrong to protect yourself? I mean, wouldn't you guard? Wouldn't you? I mean, after all, a guy's got to defend himself, doesn't he? I mean, when somebody's out to get you, isn't it all right to at least put up your fist? Show them your black belt. What did he do? I know what he said he was going to do. You remember that? What he said he would do? I mean, what he said you should do. You know, preachers do that, what you should do, but who does it? You know that. Let me tell you, let me read to you what he said you should do. It's the Sermon on the Mount thing, you know. He said, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, here's what you ought to do. Resist not an evil person. Good luck on that one, right? Resist not an evil person. Whoever slaps you on your right cheek, kick him in the shins. No. Whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn. Oh, you know all this. The other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. That must have really sounded good, right? Everybody must have went, whoa. But who's going to do that? Did he do that? No plot? We're getting a picture of Jesus here, folks. Here's this whole group over here that's extremely irritated with him, who now has plotted, come in, and who has focused and going to destroy him. They're dead set on it. How does he handle it? Well, he didn't handle it. What did he do? Well, he didn't do. Well, did he know it? It says he knew. In fact, let me expand that no. It's really interesting in the Greek language that read it again, verse 15. But when Jesus knew it, the word it isn't there. So take a pencil and strike that thing out of there. It literally says when Jesus knew. See, maybe it isn't just that he knew the Pharisees, knew the smell, knew the sense of evil that was present and coming at him. Maybe it was that he knew, he knew that. There's no question about that. He knew that and knew them and what they were going to do. But wouldn't it be interesting if the know here isn't just about knowing them? Maybe he knew something about the Father too. And maybe what he knew about the Father was so sufficient in his life that all that he knew about them and their evil plotting didn't matter. Maybe that's the deal. Maybe it's all a picture of Jesus. Maybe it's all wrapped up in this knowing thing. Maybe it's all about experiencing him in such greatness that you gnosko by experience the wonder of who Jesus is. And he is so large and he is so big that your problems see, you can know your problems, and we do that, don't we? That's what intrigues me about responding or recovery groups. Divorce recovery, other recovery groups. We sit around and we know our problem well. But knowing my problem only enhances and enlarges my problem. See, I don't want to just know my problem. I want to know, I want to know Him. And in knowing Him and in seeing Him and in Him, being so large in my life that the problem is, hey, I don't have to, hey, this is okay. Why? Because I know. You got to get to know Him. Come on, you got to embrace Him. Come on, you got to allow Him to literally permeate the depth of your heart. You've got to let Him become so big in your knowing. Come on, you gotta see Him clearly. Come on. He's got to be large enough that He fills your total eyesight. Come on, you've got to be captured until your mind is literally filled with Him. Come on. I want to be like Him. Jesus, don't let me get off. There's always this group around. They're always irritated. They're always trying to get me distracted. They're always trying to suck me in. See, the devil always has somebody, somewhere, someplace, in some circumstance that's trying to get me sidetracked. But Jesus, could I know tonight? Yeah, I can know that, but could I know You so well that everything stays on focus because I know You? Capture me. Hey, the whole God thing, I don't know that I can. Hey, that's so big, being like God. But Jesus, could I be like You? Could I be like You? Could you and I get tight? Heads are bowed. Have you gotten distracted? Would you be willing tonight for Him to reveal Himself until you know Him? Could He overwhelm you tonight with His presence? In the midst of everything else that's going on and all the chaos that may be pressing upon you, could you see Him? Could you see Him? Could I point you to Him? Could He be the single solution to your life? Altars open. Some moments of seeking. Don't turn in. Turn out to Him. Turn beyond yourself. Don't turn into the old patterns. Let Him establish a new pattern in your life. Seek Him. Seek Him. Oh, Jesus, I want to be like You. I want to be like You. Please, let me know You and be like You. Let's seek Him together.